Before this episode begins, I'd like to say that I will be heading to DinoCon UK on the 25th and 26th of July in Birmingham. So if you see me wandering around in my podcast t-shirt, come and say hello. I have bookmarks and pin badges to give away as well. I'm really looking forward to it, and I'll see you there. This is just a warning to say that this episode features spoilers, mild language, and lots of talk about dinosaurs. Now, if that's not for you, then drop what you're doing and leave now. Hello and welcome back to Road to Rebirth. I'm Roland Squire. Each week in the lead up to Jurassic World Rebirth, releasing this July, I'm sitting down with a guest to discuss an entry or aspect of the Jurassic franchise. Now, before I get into today's two interviews I've got to share with you, we've had some fairly sizable Rebirth news, and that is that two-time Oscar-winning composer Alexander Desplat will be scoring the new film. This is really exciting news after a few weeks of rumours swirling around about who actually would do it. But Desplat has worked with Gareth Edwards before on Godzilla, which is a thunderously amazing score in my opinion, and borrows a lot of cues from the 1954 original Godzilla. He was down to score the music for Rogue One, but due to the trouble that film had in post-production, it never happened, and instead was replaced by Michael Giacchino. Lots of Jurassic connections there for you. Fingers crossed that doesn't actually happen this time. I mean, the video they've released is him scoring the film, so you'd think this film is pretty much locked in for the score to be recorded, but there we are. He's also scored the last few Harry Potter films, and when you watch those films, when Williams doesn't score the Harry Potter films, it feels a bit flat, until that is, Desplat comes on board and we suddenly return to those lush scores and themes that Williams wrote. And it's interesting looking at Desplat's filmography. He mainly does dramas, whether they be big budget or little budget, and things like the Wes Anderson films. He's done, obviously he won the Oscar for Shape of Water and for Grand Budapest Hotel. But Godzilla, when you look at it, at his film scores, it sticks out a little bit. So it's interesting what he's going to bring to this film. But he managed to honour John Williams very nicely with his work on the Harry Potter films. So I'm confident he's going to do exactly the same for this. Now, on to today's episode. Coming up, I've got the second part of my interview with James Lovegrove. But first, I caught up with author Guy Adams to chat about his thoughts about Crichton. We've got so much to get through, so let's just dive straight in. Please welcome to the podcast, Guy Adams. Hi, Guy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, Roland. Very happy to be here. Shall I explain who I am?
Yes. No. Yeah. Just for people who are not familiar with your work.
The vast majority out there. So I'm a writer. I've written far too many books. I've written far too many comics. I've written far too much audio drama. Yeah, I write a lot of special features for Blu-rays and particularly Arrow, sometimes Radiance. It's a thing. It's my sideline. It's my little hyper-focus obsession that I like to run on the side.
I was wondering today whether we could talk about Michael Crichton and kind of explore a little bit more of his adaptations and film work, I suppose, but also his work as an author. I was wondering what your take on Crichton is as an author yourself. I mean, are you a fan of Crichton?
I don't know if I'm a fan. I admire what he achieved. I think Crichton was an amazing machine, a really well-tooled machine for crafting plot for television and film. Writers can often be really useless at monetizing themselves. They're terrible at monetizing themselves. They're terrible at having any confidence in themselves. These tend to be the failures of most writers. I think Crichton excelled at both of those two things.
Yes, yeah.
Unassailable confidence. In fact, could not handle criticism at all. So perhaps not quite as confident as he comes across, but was certainly wonderful at monetizing his words. And that, if that sounds harsh, I don't necessarily mean it to. There's nothing wrong with being able to monetize one's skills. That's that's the dream, isn't it, for most people, to be able to find the thing that they can do and they can do happily, and be able to survive off it, or not making a sort of snobbish judgment on that. But I think that is his greatest skill. And I remember he first started selling essays to fellow students.
Right, really?
At Harvard, I presume, because he went to Harvard. He wrote essays for the other students and would sell them to them so that they didn't have to do their own coursework. So from the off, he's figuring out how to make money out of writing, and paid his way through medical school by writing pulp novels. And what most of us have. Certainly my parents made a big fuss. I wanted to be an actor, actually, rather than a writer when I was young. But they made a big fuss about, you need to have a proper job. You need to have something to fall back on. And most parents dream of their children becoming something as secure and rarefied as a doctor. And he's paying to become a doctor as if that's the sideline by writing pulp crime novels with John Lange.
The John Lange. Yeah.
Which I haven't read, actually. I don't know. I sort of imagine I'd probably quite like that. I like the idea of Crichton pulpier than Crichton actually is. I think Crichton's quite cold, quite.
Yeah.
I think from a personal taste point of view, what Crichton would benefit from is more pulpishness, more emotion and raw playfulness, even perhaps. So it's the strength of doing that, I think, is quite profound. Most of us, the amount of doubt I have every time I type a bloody line, it's infuriating. I kind of know on a gut level that I'm good at what I do. I can write. I'm okay. The effort it takes to sort of put that out into the world and to fight for it, to actually have the confidence. So I envy that hugely. I think that was a great thing he had.
Yeah, do you know Cal Newport? He's a science professor and author. He does lots of stuff on productivity, but he wrote one of his pieces that he wrote years ago was to do with the difference between somebody like Michael Crichton and John Grisham, and taking like Crichton, who was somebody who was constantly changing what he wanted to research or what he wanted to talk about. He needed his work to really further those ideas of his research or something that he's read, and wanted to be involved in the adaptations of everything, have control. He wanted to have control of his own work, whereas John Grisham is seemingly a writer to alleviate the stresses of everyday life. He is quite happy to write a couple of books a year, have a few Hollywood conversations, and then live a nice, peaceful life. Whereas Crichton is always looking to disrupt, I suppose, kind of everything that he comes into contact with. Sometimes it feels like
it does, and I can be terribly guilty of trying to recognize sort of mental states in people, but his writing process of how he would do nothing but write, and he would decrease the amount of sleep he had day after day, so that he was getting by on something like 4 hours sleep by the time he was close to delivery. I can relate to that, being I'm autistic, ADHD, so that means that when I have to come and create, usually I need the pure, terrifying scream of deadline to get anything out of me. I need the panic. Whereas we all know that actually you should just be wonderfully calmly writing 1,000 words a day or 2,000 words a day, whatever your comfortable output is, and never pushing beyond that, never causing the stress, and just therefore always being really well structured. But a man like Crichton, who decides nothing else can happen, he eats the same food every day. He works 7 days a week, however many hours a day, that then extending until he's finished. That is someone that is utterly hyper-focusing on getting that book done.
Yes.
And wrote very quickly. Therefore, nothing else exists except that book. And then, as you say, probably goes back to what is really interesting him, which is whatever latest article in Scientific American or whatever that has tickled his synapses at that point. But I mean, it's very obsessive work ethic and work behavior. It is properly, it's the orange and the squeezer, isn't it? It's really just eviscerating himself to get the book out and then moving on.
Yeah.
Is there any fun in that process?
Yeah, I wonder.
Did Michael Crichton ever have fun? That's my question.
And this is quite nicely makes me lead on and talk about his adaptations, because he was writing as an author, and then quickly after the release of Andromeda Strain in 1971, which was directed by Robert Wise, he then suddenly was propelled into Hollywood and was writing and directing almost instantly. I'm going to do this now. I'm going to be a director. I'm going to be a writer for film. For a lot of his adaptations, is what I spoke to James about a couple of weeks ago, and the fact that he doesn't get humans. He doesn't. It's more what they can do for him, and so it seems like with his adaptations, he needs other people to come on and provide the human element. And the one that came after Jurassic Park, which was Twister, which I've actually just watched this morning for the first time since probably about 1997. I read that Joss Whedon was brought in to, I suppose, add some humour and fun to the character's dialogue.
Where Joss Whedon was your go-to person at that point for really warm humaning. We might look back on that and find that bizarre, but he was, Marvel used him for exactly the same reasons. I always think it's interesting that probably Crichton that is cinematically most perfect is pairing with Spielberg, who is heart on screen you'll ever see. Spielberg it's wrong to say Spielberg's not cerebral. He's got a good brain on him, but he feels he is about the experiential creation of the story. It's not about the intellectual exercise of, isn't that an interesting idea? It's about how do I now experience that idea, and Crichton needed that so desperately. Your conversation with James, we're all friends, but before I sound like I'm dissing Lovegrove, I'm not. Had an interesting point for me. He was talking about how in the book, Crichton's explanation of how dinosaurs are created is very scientific and quite, and grounded. And then you get to the film, and I think James felt he didn't like the idea that Spielberg turned it into this snappy moment that's an animated sequence with, your cuddly doctor explaining to the kids how they made dinosaurs. Whereas to me, I think that's absolutely genius storytelling to take what could be very dense material and go, I know how I'll deliver it. I'll deliver it as if it's a theme park ride, and it's via the cartoon, and boom, that's how we did it. Let's move on, because that's not actually the interesting thing. We don't care how you made dinosaurs. We want to see the dinosaurs. For me, that's Spielberg at his best, really.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that combination between Spielberg and Crichton worked really well, and that's how Twister came out of that, was this wanting to continue that relationship that they had, and obviously ER that they wrote together as well, produced, created together.
And you feel Twister's got heart? I'll be honest, I've never seen Twister. Twister's one that's passed me by, but Twister take the Crichton sort of science and give it lots of heart.
Yeah, I think it's not based on a book, so it's not based on an original Crichton book, but I think it's a really good depiction of a Crichton story on screen. Yeah, Twister does a good job of blending the science and the characters together. And his stories are very simple. They're always to do with money and science. And in Twister, you have one set of storm chasers that are very much the ones with no money, but they do it for the science. And then you've got the night crawlers who are sponsored by a big TV company to go and chase the tornadoes. And they're doing it for the money and not the science. And so obviously we want to follow with Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton and Philip Seymour Hoffman as well, which is what adaptations have you seen and stand out for you for Crichton?
Weirdly, I always quite loved the first Great Train Robbery. I wonder if I'd still like it now, I must admit, but I adored that film for years when I was young. I think now I look at it and I kind of squint at its use of its solitary female character, whereas when I was a kid, I wouldn't have noticed that. I'm just staring at Connery and particularly Donald Sutherland, because I love Donald Sutherland. But I liked the fun of that, the fun of the Victorian heist. I think for me, Crichton is best when he is fun, when there is a sense of joy to him, and that's difficult because, as you say, it doesn't always come naturally. I don't think to him. I remember Eaters of the Dead. What was the film one called? Eaters of the Dead, was it?
It's 13th Warrior.
Yeah. Which I was really excited about, and then I watched it, and again, it just feels flat.
And actually, Crichton came on board to do the reshoots after test screenings weren't very good.
Yeah.
So he replaced John McTiernan.
There's the weird thing with, was it Rising Sun? Where
Yes, there's one I've never seen, actually.
Where he distanced himself from that because he didn't like the fact, the director of that, he felt that he was softening the anti-Japanese sort of stance of the story. Basically, it wasn't quite racist enough for it. So he distanced himself from it. Is quite a bizarre line to take.
And have you seen, what's your take on like Terminal Man or Westworld?
Well, Terminal Man is a rare case, I think, where actually it is pure Crichton cold, and yet Crichton's not that involved in it, which is interesting. It's the idea obviously is Crichton's, and the story is Crichton's, but he wasn't particularly involved in the production of the film, and yet it has that. There's a real quality to some 70s sci-fi where it feels like this sort of this dog whistle whine of really clinical kind of. The colors and the feel of the film are blues and cold. And George Siegel, who's such a warm, avuncular performer, in this is utterly against type, which again is actually really interesting. I like it more than I understand why. I can think of lots of reasons why I shouldn't like its sort of austerity, and yet it works. I think. I think perhaps that's the key to adapting Crichton. You've either got to just shovel in the warmth and the heart, or you really lean into that scalpel edge of cold and create something that for an hour and a half really gives you a shiver.
And the idea that the coldness is scary, and I think that is really prominent in Andromeda Strain. It's really interesting the way you don't have a villain that you can see, but there is so much tension in that film and in that story that it just works. I don't think that would have worked in the 80s. I think it needed to be a 70s film. The fear comes from being the absence of humanity, really.
Yeah, I think Crichton himself had a great absence of humanity. I don't think he was a particularly warm human, and therefore his work works best when it explores that lack of humanity. I think these are stories he was perfectly built to tell. And again, if that sounds critical, I don't necessarily mean it to. We can't all be big bundles of emotional empathy. I don't feel he possessed much in the way of empathy. The responses he's had to a few things, his attitude towards critics and things like that, is violent and quite violent times. There was a cruelty to Crichton. So I don't think he was a warm human. And so I think if when he leans into that aspect, that's always going to be storytelling that's perfect for him. I'm trying to move away from the word cold, but it is a perfect. It is the overriding feeling I have. And so, as you were saying about the cinema, so much 70s cinema thrives off that. I don't know what happened to us culturally. Well, lots of awful things happened to us culturally. So that come the 80s, we wanted neon and glow and money. I don't know, the Friends of Eddie Coyle pops in my head as an example of this world away from Crichton, but one of those with that sort of storytelling where you're actually pulled back from the people. You just watch them over there doing something. And what they're doing isn't kind, it isn't good. And you're not brought into them. You're not up here in that gang, but you are a chilly little fly on the wall, watching the awful occur. And I think Crichton, there was a version of Jurassic Park that is just an awful horror film.
Bleak. He takes a real, it's not pleasure. It's just, in the deaths in the book are all from the character's point of view, and they're all extended where they suddenly realize where they went wrong in life. And it's the fact that their head is in the mouth of a dinosaur, and they realize that their life is at an end. And he extends those moments quite a lot in the book, particularly in The Lost World. Lewis Dodgson, who gets carried away into the forest by an adult T-Rex to be fed to the young. And it is a really horrific ending to this character, even though he's the villain of the piece, I suppose. But it's just the extent that he goes to, and yeah, that cold distance that he has from those characters, where he just plants himself in them and just imagines what it would be like to be eaten alive by 3 tiny T-Rexes.
I accused him of having no empathy. See how wrong I was. Which do you prefer? Or do you love both as sort of separate things? Or do you prefer that?
I think that's what's quite good about Jurassic Park, is that I think that it's a good, as I spoke to Derek last week, it's a good adaptation, but also a bad adaptation. It takes everything that you need from the book and adds everything that the book doesn't have. I think you can have both. I think you can enjoy both nicely. I'm imagining that the new film, Jurassic World Rebirth, will probably add in a bit more of that Crichton coldness. We've got Gareth Edwards on board as the director, and he is a director, I think, that comes out of his love of those 1970s science fiction thrillers.
Monsters, I think, is just superb. It's beautiful. The first Godzilla film we did less so, but it doesn't feel entirely Gareth Edwards to me. But I may be wrong. It stumbles in places where I wouldn't expect him to do so. But that's, he's working for a big studio. He's a lot of notes. What I'd quite like, what I'm hoping, is that this is a film that didn't get a lot of notes. Or if it did, they were all from Scarlett Johansson. I trust her notes. I mean, it's part of a huge subject that is the monstrous on film. But I think the skill of giving heft to the monstrous, giving, monsters succeeds. You see so little of them. And I'm not going to lean into the cliche of, the less you show, the better, because that's, it depends who you are. It depends what your talents are. It's just very easy bullshit, that one. It can be effective equally. It can be pointless. But, he showed very little because he couldn't afford to. He was doing his own special effects on a laptop. But it creates this godlike sense of the monsters being so terrifyingly unassailable. They are properly remotely unknown. When you're making a monster movie, I think the ability to turn your pixels into peril is quite key. We can enjoy the spectacle, and I think Godzilla often has spectacle. And Godzilla, the beast, has gravity, it has heft, it has a sinewy quality. But at no point in the film did I ever feel fearful of the monsters on screen. And I'll be interested to see what we have here, because I think that's the real key to any Jurassic Park film, is if you can try and find that balance where we're, go, oh fuck, it's a Diplodocus. I want to be able to say that at the screening of a you just had to put a qualification on this podcast for the stupidest sentence imaginable. You will now have to put this because I just said that.
So you're gonna come back in a couple of weeks, and we're gonna talk about the creation of monster movies and talking about Godzilla, Jaws, Alien, The Thing. I was wondering before we leave, what you think the lasting legacy of Michael Crichton is.
It's a really cynical answer, and that's just the sheer weight of product. And I'm thinking in cinematic corporate terms here of franchise. You think purely the sheer gravitational weight that is the Jurassic Park franchise. Westworld, the other theme park that goes wrong. These are massive islands. I'm talking about Wes Craven in an article at the moment, and you have this weirdness of Wes Craven managing to sort of go, I tell you what, I'll have 2 major, franchises. I'll create 2 big islands in cinema, and I think Crichton has a lot You know, I mean, because all of those other films are successful and continue to roll on to be successful. You know, we don't often talk about disclosure, but it's still making someone a lot of money somewhere, probably. I presume it continues to pay for itself quite handsomely. That's not to be sort of sniffed at, really. It may not seem like an artistic consideration, but if you just look at on the pure level of how many people working in this industry have received regular paychecks thanks to, you know, these huge sort of icebergs of commercial stuff that have existed because of Crichton. It's quite something. You know, is that a bad thing? I don't know. I don't think so. Really. It's a different consideration. It's not the consideration most of us sort of as creatives would want someone to say, perhaps. I don't think he would mind it, though. I think for me to say that, you know, the main thing, Crichton made a lot of people very, very rich. I think he would be sort of happy about that. This sort of global warming of cash there, that would salt the wound slightly. But, you know, I think that's quite an achievement. And I can't think of many writers that did it so, you know, you can Stephen King, but to have done it in so many different areas, you know, medicals, TV series, a monster movie franchise that isn't for kids but skews family. You know, all these weird different islands of stuff that are so different from each other, while they may have this thread through them. I think that's quite something. Most people find one thing, hit at it, and if they're really lucky, they succeed. You know, he succeeded in a lot of different areas. You know, and good for him.
If we shift and talk about the sequel, which is a big moment for Michael Crichton. This is the only sequel that Michael Crichton wrote. So that was released in 1995, I believe.
Yeah, he didn't want to do it initially because, as you say, he'd never written a sequel before. But I don't think anyone could deny how successful the film was, and therefore the book would have been caught up in the slipstream had it not already been successful in its own right. And I think that, the case is that Spielberg wanted to make a sequel, and so Crichton said, he's quoted as saying that a sequel was a very difficult structural problem because it has to be the same but different. If it's really the same, then it's the same, and if it's really different, then it's not a sequel. So it's in some funny intermediate territory. And I have to say that there is a sense of The Lost World that he's not as comfortable with it as he was with the first book. It's a very different proposition, and there are, you know, dissimilarities. But it's interesting that I certainly got the sense reading it the first time round that he wasn't happy with it, and he was less sure-footed with it than he was with the first one.
I think that's fair to say, definitely. I think it was something that was Spielberg persuaded him to do because he didn't want to do a Jurassic Park sequel without Michael Crichton being involved and providing the bedrock narrative for him.
Yes, you can see that in the movie, Spielberg has filleted the best bits out of the book, and then added an awful lot else. I think David Cope did the screenplay, and he did for the first film. And so between them, they conjured up an awful lot more. And again, you know, they've taken away the scientific arguments and the sort of the intellectual cut and thrust, but replaced it with certainly at times a very exciting film with one or two incredibly memorable sequences in it. Mm-hmm. But something has been lost along the way, no pun intended. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think the film version is the better version of the book, and maybe, you know, Crichton didn't want to write another thrill ride in the mode of the maybe Jurassic Park. Did what he wanted to do, perhaps in the knowledge that Spielberg would come along and Spielbergize it.
It must be because it is a very different story. So we get away from that. And I never get the idea of how connected the island that they go to is to the original Jurassic Park. It borrows its title from Arthur Conan Doyle's dinosaur story, the original literary dinosaur story. Do you think he's trying to make allusions to that in the fact that this, even though the dinosaur manufactures and is InGen again, but it almost has a feeling that this could be somewhere lost to time?
Well, he said, I mean, there are a couple of direct references because he talks about a paleontologist called John Roxton, who's named after a character in the Conan Doyle book, Lord John Roxton. It's only
Right.
sort of a couple of casual mentions. My feeling is that, yeah, in the novel, this is a kind of a free-range version of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And it's like Blue Sky thinking out of the box place where they could just tinker around and see what comes out of it. But I mean, for those who don't know, the Lost World, the Arthur Conan Doyle book, is set on top of a plateau in South America, where that's been so isolated from the rest of evolution that dinosaurs still roam there, as do a sort of tribe of primitive ape men as well. And it's a wonderful book. I mean, I love it. And it's the one that introduced the world to Professor Challenger, who's Conan Doyle's second known character, who is this enormous, booming, bearded scientist / explorer who just rides roughshod over everyone. He's rather wonderful. I think you're right. I think Crichton wanted to do that kind of what if there were just dinosaurs for no good reason.
Yeah.
But let's just have some fun with these dinosaurs who've created their own ecosystem, who are just roaming wild, and see what happens with that. And then put people into that. And this time it's like Jurassic Park, but there are no guardrails. There's no security system. It's uncontained. It's unconstrained. It's much less safe, and therefore, for the readers at least, there's greater potential for dengue excitement and Diane chomping people.
What was your first reaction to The Lost World coming out? Did you read it all in one go?
Not quite, but funnily enough, I reviewed it for the science fiction magazine Interzone, the late lamented Interzone at the time, and I was rather snippy about it, and I do regret that, because having reread it recently for this podcast, I enjoyed it a lot more the second time around. The first time around, I said something like, Crichton has to twist plot and motivation into pretzel shapes, and although there is the occasional palm sweat moment, for the most part, the T-Rex chases and raptor attacks and all-terrain vehicle crashes are lackluster and perfunctory. They're not because they belong, but because they are expected. And obviously that, slightly negative review harmed Michael Crichton's career terribly, and he never wrote again. And I, as I say, I do regret it. I do think I was wrong. It is, as sequels go, I don't think he could have done anything different, and I don't think he'd have done it any better. I think the one thing I was disappointed by was the fact that he brought children into it again, because for me, one of the weak points of Jurassic Park, the novel, are the kids in it. I would much rather they hadn't been there.
Yeah. He's
And
not
also,
great at writing children, I don't think.
he's not. They have to be super smart, you know. And in Jurassic Park, I think Tim is a sort of computer whiz, and in Lost World, Harvey is a computer whiz.
Yeah.
And they are there to ask questions of the other characters so that they can be info dumped with all the things that we as the readers need to know. You're right. He's not good at them, and I think Steven Spielberg acknowledged that, because in the book there are two kids, Kelly and Darby, and in the film they get sort of telescoped into the one kid, Kelly, who is Jeff Goldblum's daughter, which is nice because at least it gives them a slightly more plausible reason for being there.
Yes.
For stowing away and getting onto Isla Nubla, the second island. Whereas in the book, I'm not exactly quite sure how that or why that would happen.
Yeah, it's interesting the kind of way that Crichton doesn't like the idea of families and connected relationships. You know, you get a relationship between Harding, like Sarah Harding, who's there, and it's hinted that they've had a relationship in the past. Malcolm and her. Yeah. But again, it's not as explicit as being the girlfriend, which he's turned into for the film version, and Kelly is the daughter of Ian Malcolm. So it's, whereas Spielberg is all about family and family connections and the relationships, however strained they can be, that's not part of Crichton's wheelhouse at all. And
you can also see that Spielberg looked at the first film and thought, everyone loved Bob Peck as Muldoon, British hunter, so let's get Pete Postlethwaite as another British hunter. He's out there.
My namesake, actually. because he's Roland Tembo is what he's called.
That's it, yeah. And you know, both are great actors, both no longer with us, but you know, Pete Postlethwaite was great in the role as well. But also, there were many more people because there's a whole army of sort of hunters and in the film that are there essentially to be wiped out by the dinosaurs, and that creates more spectacle. And there's always, you know, whenever I approach, let's say, a horror film, I always want there to be lots of parity, but I also want there to be lots of deaths. And if it's sort of, you've got a limited palette, and you think, oh, yeah, we'll be a few deaths, but let's go for wholesale slaughter, as Spielberg does in Lost Soul.
What's interesting about the book, it's a much darker story to Jurassic Park in its areas. The idea that the heightened sense of danger that's around every corner, the dinosaurs feel more brutal. You get the velociraptors who just eviscerate each other at any given moment. They're not fully integrated animals. They feel more like monsters, the velociraptors in both Jurassic Park, but very much more so in The Lost World. And the novel deals with like natural selection and adaptation.
Yes, and evolution as well.
Yes, evolution is the big buzzword rather than chaos theory. In the sequel.
Yes, Ian Malcolm's an expert in evolution for this time. Well,
yes,
to be.
He's managed to survive, and he's obviously been doing some reading while he was laid up in the Costa Rican hospital. Yeah, he's like, I know what I'm annoyed with now. It's evolution.
I'm going to go lots of lectures about evolution, even while we're being chased by dinosaurs. Well, I was going to say that not only are the dinosaurs more brutal, but the people are more brutal, because there is Sarah Harding on the way over, on the boat over to Isla Sorna. She's pushed off the boat by Lewis Dodgson, who is the head of Biosyn, the rival. And she luckily survives and gets to shore. And then later, when she gets a chance to kill Dodgson, she doesn't hesitate, but takes spoiler alert, but she pushes him out from under the car. He gets picked up by a T-Rex, taken to the T-Rex nest, and there the parent T-Rex lets the brood of younger T-Rexes just basically learn how to kill by practicing on Lewis Dodgson. And it's a very nasty scene. And it's generally, you get the feeling that this is nature in red in tooth and claw, both for the dinosaurs and for the humans as well.
Yeah, yeah. And if we were talking about Elon Musk, he feels like the Elon Musk of this book.
Yeah.
Nedry went out to try and get him the embryos. He failed. He's not going to fail this time, and they're going to get the eggs. And I love all those scenes with the box that emits the noise to get rid of the dinosaurs, so then they can go in and get. It's very effective. And I think the first time I read it, I like you, it was just so down on everything. It felt like when I first read it, I didn't get the excitement that I got from reading Jurassic Park or the wonder of the film in The Lost World. It felt like a completely different beast. And actually reading it the second time, I've enjoyed it a lot more. There's elements that I can see within the story that I'm like, why haven't they done any of these bits in the films? It's all sitting there. Yeah, and definitely Lewis Dodgson as this, he's the villain of the piece. He's the Hammond of, I take it Hammond is the villain of Jurassic Park.
You have to think that someone has to be, because the dinosaurs are sexually chaotic neutral. But I wonder if the choice of Lewis Dodgson's name as well, because it's a sort of amalgamation of Lewis Carroll and Charlotte Which Dodgson was Lewis Carroll. And that seems to be a deliberate choice, as though I know he's in the first book, but in The Lost World, he's there. This is sort of almost a fantasy, like Alice Through the Looking Glass or Alice in Wonderland. This is a wonderland, but an incredibly dangerous one.
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah, I'd never made that connection between his name and
But it seems too old. Crichton is too smart a person not to realise that reference.
Yeah.
Having said which, in Rising Sun, the main character is called John Connor. And I always wondered, did you actually watch the Terminator film? There's quite a well-known John Connor who's been out, because that book came out in the sort of 90s. So I do wonder, how plugged into popular culture Michael Crichton did. But I don't think he would have done Lewis Dodgson's name by mistake.
No, that feels like a deliberate addition. And it's interesting that the world that they go into, the Lost World, it feels like Arthur Conan Doyle's Impenetrable. And you just go, why on earth would anybody ever make anything here?
Well, I think, I mean, that because the dinosaurs on Mydlasana are fated to die, because their
Yes.
lifespans have been artificially shortened. There's something about they're fed sheep, dead sheep, and
Yeah.
that could create prions, which essentially are going to kill them. And also, the ecosystem is going to fail because there aren't enough herbivores to support the carnivores. So the carnivores are going to eat all herbivores and then have nothing left to eat apart from each other, and it's all going to die out. So it is the sense that this is a mad, doomed world. And perhaps Crichton might be making a point here about we live in a mad, doomed world, and Isla is just a sort of microcosm of that.
Yes.
We are rapidly consuming our resources, and we too will go the way of the dinosaurs. Well, if I can do it, I mean, a quotation here. Ian Malcolm actually says something like, "I sometimes think that we're a kind of plague that will scrub the earth clean. We destroy things so well that I sometimes think maybe that's our function. Maybe every few eons, some animal comes along that kills off the rest of the world, clears the decks, and lets evolution proceed to its next phase."
Yeah.
That's cheery thought.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's a lot about natural selection as well. Malcolm is also an expert on that, and they talk about how Darwin's theory of evolution is fine up to a point, but doesn't take into account the sort of there are other factors weighing in on it. Contemporary scientific thinking seems to be sort of trying to add to the whole theory that it isn't just about survival of the fittest, but survival of the species that's capable of cooperation and acting, for the social, for the good of all of society, rather than just who you can eat whom. And I think that's an interesting thing. It sort of runs counter to the argument that the Lost World, the island, presents, which is that the rapacity will result in extinction. Ian Malcolm, when he talks about natural selection, suggests perhaps the capacity to look after one another and work as a society may be what saves us.
Yeah, you can see the difficulty that Spielberg had. Imagine being presented with The Lost World, the manuscript, and having to make that into your film. Again, like Jurassic Park, but it feels even more so with The Lost World. The big ideas that Crichton is putting in, that you can't have an action film with these stop moments of Malcolm talking about kind of the state of the world.
Yeah.
Essentially telling the audience you're all going to die. You might not be eaten by dinosaurs, but you'll eat each other, sort of thing.
Yeah, you can have an action film that does that, but then that's the Matrix sequels where they stop and sort of have info-dumps about stuff, and then everyone goes, "No, thanks." No, you're right. I mean, Spielberg wants basically, we've got a bigger budget. The computer graphics have improved by leaps and bounds already, so we can have many, many more dinosaurs and do an awful lot more. So let's take elements like the baby T-Rex with the broken leg, and the super cool souped up Land Cruisers, and the motorbike chase as well. I think there's motorbikes in the
so yeah in the World. Yeah, there's the motorbike that kind of at the big, when they go through the hunter scene and they go through the legs of all the dinosaurs and stuff. Yeah.
So he takes all the good bits, all the exciting bits, and he has to, by reason of cinematic excitement, get rid of all the other stuff, because no one wants to hang around for that. Everyone wants to see dinosaurs chasing and chomping and scaring us.
And he also gets rid of characters also disappear from The Lost World. So we have Levine, who is or Levine, I don't know which
yes, I'm not sure either.
So he's a very difficult character to like.
He's kind of the Professor Challenger character. He's thrilled to be there. He's very excited. He loves watching the dinosaurs with sort of very little sense of his own safety and self-preservation. And I think we are supposed to sort of treat him as the doer, the Alan Grant of this book.
Yeah.
But I think, unfortunately, he and Ian Malcolm, they both come off as a little bit too arrogant. And again, they aren't likable. So it's hard to know who to root for in this. And perhaps that's why we have the two children, because at least we're safe with them. We know we want to root for the children, because we want the children to be safe. And to a certain extent, Sarah Harding as well is there as the
and she kind of comes across as, she's the character that I latched on probably the most of the book. She's resourceful, no nonsense.
Yeah.
He's writing The Lost World having seen Jurassic Park and knowing that it's Jeff Goldblum. And a lot of writers, I'm thinking about Dan Brown. I'm thinking about Dan Brown and the Da Vinci Code, where the character suddenly turns into Tom Hanks after the first
looked a lot like Harrison Ford in the early books or something. And much the same with Ian Fleming, after Sean Connery with James Bond gave him a Scottish father, just to sort of, to cement the Scottishness of Connery.
He doesn't feel the need to do that with Ian Malcolm. He still doesn't feel like Jeff Goldblum in the second one. I think he stuck to his guns in that he wasn't somebody that was going to be pushed into writing this story in the way that other people wanted him to write it. Which I respect. Do you think it's a necessary follow-up? Did we need a follow-up to Jurassic Park?
I think readers wanted it, and as an author, Crichton has to sort of accept sometimes that the audience are there to be entertained, and you have to accept what they want, and sometimes put that above your own needs and desires. I actually did it for the money solely, and I think that he probably felt, well, I can work out a way of doing a sequel that satisfies both me and what people expect of the sequel. I suspect, as I say, I think he did the best job he could under the circumstances. And I think the one thing the movie did, which was very much a sort of playing to the crowd, was then having the dinosaurs, or a dinosaur, end up in San Diego and go rampaging through the streets there, which is not in the book at all. I think Spielberg wanted to see that. And I think it's something that the sequels, the Jurassic World sequels, have really leaned into. That why not just have dinosaurs become part of the fabric of civilization now, and how we deal this intrusion of wild madness into our lives. And I suspect Crichton would not have gone that far. And if he had to do it, he was asked to do a second sequel, and he may well have. I don't know. I don't know whether he would have done that or not. I wonder if he might have, because a lot of his books are about sort of apocalyptic elements being introduced into our world and how we deal with it. From the Andromeda Strain through to, which is about a deadly microalien in space. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Next is about genetic modification, and Prey is about nanotechnology.
Yeah,
and all of these things.
Fantastic book. I really like Prey.
Yes. Prey is great. That's one with the swirling cloud of nanites that basically just whittle you down to nothing. So I think, he was, if one of the themes of Lost World is the potential for humanity to extinguish itself, then a third Jurassic Park novel could have had dinosaurs ruling the earth, actually ruling it.
Yeah.
And humanity, running in fear or having to cope with this.
Yeah, they have the thing of the Lost World of the DX, which is the disease that the dinosaurs have, and they seem to be the mystery element of the Lost World, like the mystery element of Jurassic Park is dinosaurs on the mainland of Costa Rica, and they're spreading a disease to humanity. That seems to be what's going on. And Levine, I don't know how seriously, but at the end, Levine is just like, I don't know whether I feel very well when me and Malcolm's telling him all about it. And, you don't know whether he's just a hypochondriac. Yeah, you get the idea that maybe Michael Crichton would have gone down that route.
And if they have this transmissible disease, that perhaps could, wipe out 80% of the population, then we would be, at the mercy of the dinosaurs who would proliferate and we would become their prey. That could be an interesting book. I mean, I imagine that people have done books like that, but I think it would have been fun to have Crichton take.
How much have you seen all of the latest?
I've always watched a Jurassic Park. I love them. The third one was okay, had moments, and I think was it the third one that had the chameleon dinosaurs in it, or was that one of the Jurassic World ones?
So the first Jurassic World had and that ties into the Lost World with. Again, that's something, reading these books, having seen the Jurassic World films, and the little elements that are taken out of the Lost World and Jurassic Park and put into those films. Yeah. Like the Carnotaurus is a chameleon dinosaur. And that's a standout moment from the from the book, I think, and it's not done to the same degree as in from Jurassic World. It's such a fabulously creepy moment when they are switching on and off the light and they're trying to trick the animals into revealing themselves. The visuals of it would have been amazing.
Yeah, you're right. I think the later movies they are sort of just trying to pick clean the carcassy of the Crichton books to get bits here and there, which is fine. I have enjoyed them, like I said, and I'm looking forward to the new one. So I think which has mutant dinosaurs in it. I think they've really gone full throttle with this one. I can't say I enjoyed the third Jurassic World maybe much. I can't remember much about it. And just the concept is so solid and so strong. There's no reason why they just can't keep churning them out.
No, it's amazing to think that there's just these 2 books that have now created going to be 7 films, and yet I still think there's more. The more I read Jurassic Park and The Lost World, there's still more to take from them. And Crichton's ideas are very rich. And I am excited to see, kind of, because it's David Koepp going back to writing the new film and looking at these books again, and I wonder what he's taken from everything. It's a very exciting thought to see that maybe we're going to get closer to what Crichton would have done for maybe a third Jurassic Park novel or idea.
At this point, dinosaurs must be everywhere. The technology is out, the genie is out of the box, or whatever you want to call it. Pandora's box has been open. There's no way we're going to get it all back in. So we have to now live with the new status quo, which is that there are dinosaurs out there and we might get eaten by them.
Yeah, it's almost like a kind of zombie apocalypse idea, but dinosaurs rather than zombies. What's your dinosaur escape plan?
I was living in Eastbourne. My zombie escape plan is to go onto the pier, close the gate, and then hopefully you'll be safe. You can live at the edge, and you can live off the fish. You can fish off the end of the pier, and that way you'll be safe from zombies. And I would think dinosaurs too.
Well, fabulous. I'd just like to say thank you so much for joining me today to talk about these 2 books. And so what are you currently working on at the moment?
I'm working on a couple of projects, which unfortunately I'm not allowed to talk about because they're still sort of, one of them is definitely happening, but it's a property that is still, it's a video game that's just been released and I'm not really able to talk about it. And the other is fiction for a very exciting worldwide intellectual property. It's a series of movies mostly. I'm doing some novels set in that world, but again, it's just at the pitching stage, so it's all a bit tentative at the moment. My next actual book is out in June, and it's a retelling of the original Galactus story by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, featuring the Fantastic Four, and it's coming out more or less contemporary with the Fantastic Four movie First Steps, which I think has Galactus in it. I've been a Marvel fan my whole life, and it's just been wonderful here to play around in that particular sandbox.
Amazing. And where can people find you online?
JamesLovegrove.com. I also am on Facebook and Twitter /X. I'm not a great user of social media, I'm afraid. And my books are available in all good bookstores.
Amazing. Well, I hope we can talk once the Jurassic World Rebirth comes out, and we can have a little chat about that as well. But I'd just like to say thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, I've really enjoyed it. I've loved talking about these books. It's great reading it, and like you, I'm very excited about the film.
My huge thanks to both Guy and to James for those conversations, and I hope you enjoyed them as much as I did recording them. It's been amazing speaking to so many knowledgeable people over the past few weeks, and I can't wait to keep bringing these episodes to you. If you like what I do, please leave me a rating. Follow me on Instagram at Road to Rebirth Pod, or email the show at roadtorebirthpod@gmail.com with your thoughts about Rebirth or anything. Just let me know. Just let me know that you're out there. Anyway, until next week, when I'll be sitting down with Caleb Burnett to talk about Steven Spielberg's The Lost World, Jurassic Park, I'll say thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.